Now that, my friends, is what you call a football Saturday. Welcome in. Thank you for listening to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan writer for The Free. I'm joined, as always, by my colleague, Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider. And Reiner, that was a fantastic day of college football. How did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I watched it from pretty much beginning to end and fell asleep with Pac-12 at night. And I wish I could have stayed up through the end of it, but I couldn't make it.
Yeah, Pac-12 after dark. It'll get you. It'll get you. We powered through and we discussed it. Yeah. Colorado State game the week before. Last night, those late games not quite as enticing. Washington, I mean, that offense continues.
Incredible.
To just be a juggernaut. I mean, you saw it firsthand the week before in East Lansing, doing it again. USC pushed a little bit by Arizona State, but man, I mean, after week 3, dude, we deserved that. We earned that. Not we, you and I, we the nation, we the supporters, those who cover, who watch, who consume college football. I mean, 6 ranked matchups, and then Florida State, Clemson, Michigan making a statement. I mean, all over. Was there anything nationally like what stood out to you? I mean, we're gonna get into the Big Ten in segment B. We're gonna get really deep into Michigan as well. But how about nationally? What stood out?
Well, I think Florida State beating Clemson was a pretty significant win, especially for that program, beating them for the first time and I think it was 5 years or 6 years.
7 straight losses.
Seven straight losses. And so, okay. And then you have them basically in the inside lane for the college football playoff. So their schedule was front loaded. And so them beating Clemson this week really kind of, again, sets them up for a really banner season for FSU and Mike Norvell.
Yeah, it does, which is super relevant for Michigan, right? I mean,
right,
4 spots. We're going to have to get into this further. I'm just, having been an AP voter this year, I'm watching more like very concentrated, the top 10 to 15 teams very closely. There are 12 serious business teams this year, at least. Teams that I think right now, I would not be surprised if made the college football playoff. There are 4 in the Pac-12 that I think could make the college football playoff. If you have 1 from the Pac-12 taking a spot, if you have 1 from the ACC taking a spot, we haven't even got to the SEC. How are 2 Big Ten teams going to get in? With Michigan, with Ohio State, with Penn State? I mean, it is so loaded this year. I think I'm going to plant my flag now. We might be setting up for one of the most historic college football seasons of all time.
Well, certainly make the case for why the college football playoff should be expanded this year in particular. But it also going back to the Florida State victory over LSU in week 1. That's why that game was so significant for Michigan fans. Michigan fans would have probably preferred LSU to win that game because the SEC is such a grind, whereas the ACC does not have the same level of competition across the board. So Florida State's path is much clearer now after beating Clemson. They again have a fairly navigable schedule to get through to the ACC title game and then eventually the college football playoff. So for Florida State, again, coming out of this month 4-0 is pretty good for their chances as far as making the college football playoff.
Yes, and for all our Florida State coverage, you can subscribe to Knowles.com. No, we're gonna move it on to Michigan, but you're right. I mean, a lot of that work is done. They do have games against Duke, against Miami left. Those look tougher, but both are at home, and so and there's no divisions in the ACC anymore. It is just the top 2 teams going to the ACC title game. So very, very relevant. However, while everyone at Florida State was through the moon happy yesterday, I think maybe the happiest man in college football, Jim Harbaugh, his return to Michigan Stadium after his 3-game suspension, a 31-7. He oversees a 31-7 victory, 31 unanswered, and he was in peak Jim Harbaugh form after the game, Reiner.
Yeah, he seemed very excited about the performance that Michigan had. Seemed excited to be back on the sideline. Overall, he had to be impressed with how the running game responded, how his team responded after getting punched in the mouth right out of the gate with the 69-yard touchdown off the slant route on the third play of the game. And so his team, kind of settled in and played their game, controlled time of possession, limited to the turnovers on their end. I mean, the stuff that J.J. McCarthy did against Bowling Green was eliminated, and he was a huge asset to the running game, open lanes. And so it was overall a very solid performance from Michigan and kind of alleviated some of the concerns about the program heading into the game.
It was because Michigan just hadn't overwhelmed three teams that it had a decided talent advantage against. And so there was a little bit of concern entering the game, especially when you consider Rutgers had just hammered Virginia Tech, right? And looked pretty impressive imposing its will on the ground and then shutting down opponents' running games. They were number 11 in the nation coming in, and Michigan was not even in the top half of the country running the ball before this game. You mentioned the early touchdown Rutgers scored. Mike Sainristil, who I think you and I would both agree has maybe been Michigan's best defender so far this year. And that is saying something because this is a unit that is loaded with talent. He's in man coverage. He slips 69 yards later. It's a house call. Then the offense goes 3 and out. The defense does force a punt. However, Jake Thaw, and I think Michigan is going to go on a quick aside with Tyler Morris in the punt return game. I haven't seen a lot out of Jake Thaw. Yet I've seen a number of times. This is at least the third time I can recall that he has let a punt bounce over his head. This seems insignificant, but someday these will be significant plays. And Michigan, instead of getting the ball at its 30, got pinned on its 6. However, Reiner, that is when Michigan engineered a 7-play, 94-yard drive that completely changed the tenor of the game. And I think you did a great job of detailing and asking about afterwards, as we were talking about during it, all the different things Michigan was showing it could do.
Yeah, I mean, they, again, motioned Donovan Edwards across the formation, sprung him wide open. The defense didn't pick him up. He got a 33-yard gain. And they, run a flea flicker with Colston Loveland. That was obviously a product. It's basically a play-action play. Again, set up by their running game, which they showed earlier in the drive with Quorum's kind of rugged 14-yard run. And then the flea flicker was really well executed. Again, a delayed release from Colston Loveland. Looked like he was going to block. And then he, goes out in the seam and catches the pass, gets them down near the goal line. And then it's just typical Michigan football, blast away at the goal line. And Quorum, goes over the goal line on a little dive play. So it was an impressive drive by Michigan, kind of really showcased what they're all about from an offensive standpoint, and definitely changed the complexion of the game from that point forward.
Showcased the balance, certainly, and Jim Harbaugh sort of gave his Bo Schembechler impression after the game about how it was a game Bo would have loved. 200 yards through the air, 200 yards on the ground, and that drive is where that started. Now, I want to turn our attention to the run game because that was going to be what determined this game. If you looked at the box score and you looked at both rushing lines, you'd have a pretty good idea of how the game finished. Michigan, 40 rushes, 201 yards. That's 5 yards a carry. Rutgers, 23 rushes, 77 yards, just more than 3 yards a carry. And Michigan's run game, I believe, and I think both of us believe, was able to excel more against a stouter front than it did in the non-conference because of what it was not willing to do or did not want to show or was hesitant to do, and that's let JJ use his legs as well. He ran 7 times for 51 yards, really 7 for 60, not counting the sacks. 5 for 60, not counting the sacks.
Yeah, he was very effective pulling the ball, getting to the edge of the defense. They couldn't contain him on the edges, Rutgers. And so that, again, opened up more lanes on the inside for Blake Corum, especially in the A and B gaps. It basically spread out the Rutgers defense where they couldn't load in the box quite as much as they probably wanted to. And so McCarthy really adds a different element to the running game and creates issues for the opposing defense that has to kind of be honest in how they play Michigan now, knowing that, McCarthy could easily pull the ball at any moment and take off and run. I mean, he, again, showed an incredible ability basically to not get stopped, I guess, on the edges, and just to be able to avoid, oncoming tacklers as much, and even get to the sideline and get out without being harmed.
That's the key there as well, because if Michigan is going to continue to let him use his legs more than just the improvising, right? More than the scrambling, the extending plays, but designed runs. If Michigan's going to do that, JJ has to show the coaches, look, you can trust me to protect myself and get what I can, but then accept where I shouldn't be fighting for extra yardage. And Blake Corum, 21 rushes, 97 yards, 2 scores. Now, he said that JJ opens up, the threat of JJ, just the threat of him helps open him up tremendously. And there was you said it, there was a 3rd and 3, there was a 4th and 1, a number of times JJ just moved the sticks with his legs. And that's going to continue to help Corum. Here is just one small aside. I don't know if there's a leg or an arm to go off on, but I wanted to make sure I made a note of it. Michigan could have given Blake Corum another run in the 4th quarter to get him to his 100 yards. They didn't. I think I'm just filing that away as a mental note of a team that knows this season is not about those awards, right? Like Blake Corum, they were talking about Heisman and different things like all throughout the season. Blake Corum has not run he had 101 yards on the ground last week, 97, right? He has not had a big game. He's got 8 touchdowns. He's having a great season. He's going to be an all Big Ten back. He might be an All-American also because of his name, but they're going to use him as is effective, but they're not just trying to be cute. And I appreciated that. I don't know if that even matters. I don't know if I'm looking too far into that.
I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other. And I don't think Blake Corum's the type of player that really cares about that as much as maybe some other kind of star level player. I think he's just happy. And he's repeatedly said that, the goal is to win the game. And so that's what Michigan is doing. And that's what they did in the second half. The whole second half was designed just to kind of get out of there as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah. And when they did that, as we've continued to say, it's happened on the ground. But something that stuck out to me when Corum did come out of the game after those final 21 carries, and Michigan was salting the game away on the ground, it was Kalel Mullings who came in and not Donovan Edwards. Reiner, Michigan has had a very solid start to the season. If I was to single out a single most disappointing aspect, surprising aspect for me personally, there's no question. It's Edwards. 6 carries, 13 yards. He still has not found the end zone this year. And really, even on the play that you mentioned, as they scheme him open in the passing game, they move him in motion. Rutgers defense, it's a blown assignment. Nobody goes with him, and the play was designed to get him in motion, to get him open. Now he, like I said, is a fantastic athlete. He has the capability of making people miss. He has the capability of running around people, through people. But on that play, he didn't do it. And so yes, he still got the 33 yards, but it didn't prove anything to me. It was just a free play. On his other 7 touches, he got 20 yards total. I don't know. I don't know what Michigan should do here. I really don't. If Kalel needs to be the second back, if you consider using Donovan more as a slot receiver, where he has been more effective in the pass game than the run game, or if Mike Hart continues to do what he's done and not listen to my advice or my thoughts, as he should not, and just continue to trust that Donovan can be effective in the run game. Where are you on that, Brian?
Yeah, I think there is obviously heightened level of concern there. And I think it goes back to the fact that Michigan hasn't really been that great up the middle as far as run blocking is concerned. I mean, if you look at the numbers that Pro Football Focus had, I mean, they were, pretty much struggling in the A gap, with runs. And some of those runs are kind of the ones that Donovan Edwards is pretty good at, just kind of that one cut and burst through the hole. And so if that's not opened up for him, he can't get to that second level, third level, and he's not one to break a lot of tackles. So I think Michigan, has to be aware of some of their limitations in the way that they use and deploy Donovan Edwards.
To your point, Blake Corum, 5 rushes through the A gap yesterday. We're recording Sunday shortly before noon. So on Saturday, 5 rushes for 11 yards to the A gap, but Edwards did not have any carries directly up the middle this week. So maybe there is something to be said about utilizing him for his strengths. However, I do think Edwards is best on the edge, right? On that off tackle run when he looks like he's running off the tackle. If he's running right, puts that right foot in the ground, plants, and then turns north and south, but makes decided cuts, not just lollygagging, but he needs to make a decision and make a choice. And so I'm not sure where the offense goes from there. But and remember, last year Blake Corum is a Heisman frontrunner, right? And then for me, I was not a Heisman voter, but when he goes out and Donovan Edwards comes in and runs 22 times for 216 yards, I'm like, well, Blake's a tremendous player, but that takes away from me, or it shows me that the offensive line is really doing a lot. Look at the work Blake Corum is doing right now compared to Edwards behind the same line. I mean, for anybody who had any question about the running levels of these two backs, just based on numbers and efficiency and explosion last year, the answers are coming through right now.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Blake Corum is obviously a very talented runner, especially in tight spaces. And again, the blocking hasn't been as clean, so he's been more effective in trying to make something out of nothing, a la Ken Walker for Michigan State in 2021. I mean, Kenneth Walker was it was the same way. And Blake Corum has that same ability to kind of make something out of nothing, being able to operate in tight spaces and turn maybe a 2-yard gain into a 4-yard gain, or basically a stuff into a 2-yard gain or something like that. So, I think, again, Blake Corum is probably a more complete running back and more talented as far as a runner, and more elusive in some ways than Donovan Edwards.
I'd say he's 90 to 95% of last year right now.
Right.
What do you think?
I agree. Yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, the best thing I saw was, again, in the Bowling Green game where, again, it looked like he was doing a lot of the same things he did last year, being able to kind of maneuver in and out, hit that extra gear right out of his cuts. So any concern about Blake Corum coming off the knee injury, I think, should be kind of pushed to the side at this point. I mean, he looks like the same player he was last year.
Yeah, certainly well past that 21 carries. They're giving him the workload. So no longer any concerns. A unit that never had any concerns was the defense. And there are fewer and fewer by the week. Another unbelievable performance. Starting, and I think we need to start with the run defense specifically. A week prior, Rutgers ran 40-some times for 256 yards and 4 touchdowns, averaged 7.5 yards a carry. Michigan's run defense, without Mason Graham, mind you, who might be, alongside Chris Jenkins, the best interior run defender on this team, held Rutgers to 23 carries for 77 yards.
Yeah, and they had a little bit of issues at the beginning of the game, and then it just seemed to solidify as the game went on. Maybe that had something to do with, again, Michigan being able to take the lead and being able to kind of put pressure on Wimsatt and Rutgers' offense as far as strategy was concerned. I mean, they couldn't necessarily run the ball especially in the second half when they got down by double digits. Especially after the pick 6 from Mike Sainristil. I mean, the complexion of the game, totally changed at that point. But yes, I think the run wall was pretty impressive across the board. I mean, the fact that they did that without Mason Graham, who's one of their best run defenders too, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and Mikey Sainristil, the pick 6 that you mentioned comes on a 4th and 2. Rutgers on Michigan's 27, but by that point, the way they had started getting down the field was a couple of, really incredible throw and catches. Some of the better throws I've seen Wimsatt make. I mean, from one hash to the opposite sideline with a defender in blanket coverage. So, Rutgers was having to work for everything they were getting just to get down the field in that third quarter. But Michigan knew they had all but abandoned the run, right? And that is what allows someone like a heads-up player like Sainristil to with everyone pitting their ears back. He can have his eyes in the backfield, read the quarterback, and then just jump a screen route, right? Like jumping a screen route, you know it's coming. And that's what happens when you're gearing up, when you have eliminated the strength of one team and you can expect the other, even on a 4th and 2, which Rutgers is often a run scenario, a read option run that they could hand off or keep with Wimsatt.
Yeah, but Sainristil has played offense. He was a former receiver and just understands what's going on, how receivers get in and out of their breaks, what they're planning to do. And he read that. You can just see the way he came up and just swooped in and grabbed that ball. I mean, he was reading it from the get-go, knew exactly what the receiver was about to do, and beat him to the punch. And that was one of the most impressive plays of the season so far. And just more evidence of how sharp of a player he is. I think you can make a very good case that he's the most impactful defensive player for Michigan.
Yep. I mean, right now, I have, as we've said a couple times, I had to do an AP All-American vote before the season and voting for the AP throughout the year. He's playing like an All-American. I mean, I have not seen, he has been the best defender on both teams 2 or 3 out of the 4 weeks. I mean, Jalen Harrell has popped a couple times. Mason Graham's had a nice week. Kenneth Grant had a nice week. Chris Jenkins had a good time, but nobody week in, week out, tackles for loss, sacks, PBUs, interceptions, and at the nickel spot, right? In Michigan's multiple defense that changes forms and is very malleable. A lot is asked of that position. I mean, it's just hard to overstate how much he unlocks. Do you remember when they were talking about the CB2 spot and how they're like, we might need to put Mikey Sainristil out there just because, but they always wanted him at the nickel, but they just needed him to be on the field. They are so glad that Josh Wallace is working out on the outside so far, and that has left Mikey where he was last year, where he thrived, and where he's continued to help this defense grow.
Yeah, well, the nickel back is so important in today's college football with the way that teams attack. I mean, it's a spread formations, a lot of 3-by-1 looks and such, and that's where a guy like him. Or 3-by-1, 2-by-2, whatever it is. I mean, he can defend all routes. Knows exactly what receivers are looking for. Knows the importance of leverage. Just again, based on his experience as a receiver, he's perfect for that position, and it shows. I mean, again, I go back to my time covering Alabama, and the star position, which is the nickel back, was pretty much the most important position. And usually, Nick Saban put his most intelligent player in that position, and that was during one period when I was covering Alabama was Minkah Fitzpatrick. And
he's decent.
There's some similarities between Mike Sainristil and Minkah Fitzpatrick in that they know exactly where to be at the right time, and they're always around the ball, making plays.
I mean, it's hard to overstate the decision Jim Harbaugh made to move him from one side of the ball to the other, for Sainristil to have the belief, the vision, to execute it. I'm going to talk to his mom later today, starting to work on a feature about just how much that really his Mikey Sainristil's impact, what it unlocked for this Michigan program. And it all started when he was a young receiver, which brings us full circle. How I'd like to put a bow on this Rutgers game, if we could, before we move on to some Big Ten talk at large. An impressive young receiver yesterday, Samaj Morgan. He was only on the field for 3 plays, but man, it felt like more, because he ran routes on all 3. He was targeted on 2. He grabbed both passes that were thrown his way. One of them was an 18-yard touchdown.
Yeah, it's impressive, again, considering he's a true freshman, and it's hard for a true freshman to get on the field at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh seems to like to kind of wait a little bit to see how they develop before kind of putting them in critical situations. And I mean, he was out there in the second quarter and was responsible for giving Michigan the lead, which kind of indicates how valuable they see him already, and what potential impact he can make over the course of maybe the next 3 or 4 years at Michigan. I mean, the fact that he's already on the field and leapfrogged other receivers that are older than he is on the roster is pretty impressive.
As has Frederick Moore, who was on the field for 9 snaps. Also ran 3 routes. So while he was not the recipient. The trust is there as well, and that's a really good sign for Michigan. When your 2 leading receivers are both seniors, there's going to be some turnover. So to see that next crop already learning with them is a wonderful sign. And I guess last but not least, I think I already said that, but we really got to talk just more very quickly. JJ McCarthy, nice bounce back from JJ, right? I mean, it's amazing. We made it about 25 minutes without mentioning that. Great. You see what can happen when the run game helps you, right? And when he is allowed to get involved with his legs too. 15 of 21 passing, 214 yards, the lone touchdown to Samaj Morgan. Good bounce back.
Yeah, I mean, and he made some, again, impressive throws. He threw some tight window throws. There was the throw to Loveland in the second half in coverage where he put the ball exactly where it needed to be so he can make a play. That was impressive, just given the fact that, maybe McCarthy would have been a little bit gun shy coming out of the Bowling Green game after throwing 3 interceptions and 13 attempts, but he still was pushing the ball downfield. But in this case, he was making good decisions and not just kind of just throwing the ball up there and hoping his receiver would come down to it. He was throwing it into a part where the receiver can make a play on the ball. And even the Samaj Morgan touchdown was similar. He threw him open, essentially, put him in a situation where only he could make the play. And so overall, he was making very, very sound decisions, especially as it relates to how he was running the football, when to pull it. He was also getting out of bounds, like we alluded to in the earlier in the segment. And so I think, again, it was a very encouraging performance considering what he did the previous week and how kind of concerning that was.
Yeah, solid game all around. That's why we both gave it good marks in pretty much everything we wrote on Freak.com. And now that was a good way for Michigan to end its home stretch, as it only has one home game between now and November 4th. Going to hit the road against Nebraska next week. So on the other side of the break, we'll get a little bit into that and just sort of how Michigan compares to the rest of the Big Ten East landscape at this point. You're listening to Hail Yes. And we are back. It is now time to expand our scope, take a look at the Big Ten, and much to the chagrin of those who listen to this podcast, Reiner, there was no bigger winner in the country, much less the Big Ten, than the, as they say, Ohio State Buckeyes. Gutty, gritty, impressive comeback win on the road against Notre Dame, 17-14.
It's true, and Ryan Day clearly hates Lou Holtz. I mean, it was
man.
Yeah, he was not happy with the comments about toughness and the narrative that's kind of built around the Ohio State program since they've been blasted by Michigan each of the last 2 years. He seems very sensitive to that. But again, Ohio State showed some real guts at the end of that game. I mean, Kyle McCord stepped up and made some big-time throws to get them down to the goal line. And then, again, that was a product also of a misalignment by Notre Dame. I mean, they had only 10
players
on the field, which is inexcusable. I mean, how does that happen at a program like that with all the analysts and defensive staff available? You can't have that. That's a huge oversight on their part in such a critical moment. But give Ohio State credit. I mean, there were a lot of questions going into that game whether they could, play a kind of tough physical game and grind it out against a team like Notre Dame, and they took care of business and got away with the victory. So they're set up pretty well for the rest of the season. I mean, they have a big test against Penn State, and of course they'll face Michigan, but they're obviously their playoff chances are enhanced obviously now.
But now they have a feather in their cap, right? Should they?
Right.
Let's say they all hold serve at home, right? Ohio State wins at home. Penn State wins at home. Michigan wins at home. They all have one loss. There are so many tiebreakers and weird things about how that determines who goes to the Big Ten championship. I believe it's like strength of conference opponent schedule. So like your conference opponents, how strong are they? So whoever plays the toughest opponents in the league. So Ohio State doesn't get credit for that Notre Dame win. However, I believe the thinking was Michigan preseason was slightly favored in that metric. So let's say that all holds true. They all go 1-1. Michigan goes to the college football playoff. Elsewhere, there's chaos. And that 4th spot, just like Ohio State slid into it last year, is open again. We saw Ohio State slide into it without a win of this caliber. And so that's another, it's certainly, a big step for the Buckeyes. But also, if you're Ryan Day, I mean, this had to be just the longest time coming. I mean, there are quite the narratives surrounding a coach who's 49-6. Right? I mean, yes, Michigan has handed it to him the last 2 years, straight handed it to him. And that doesn't fly in Columbus and can't and shouldn't. But man, did they still have a lead on Georgia against national champion Georgia and looked every bit like they belonged on the same field as them a few months later or a few weeks later. Like Ohio State is legit. And Michigan is obviously every bit as legit. And if you're Ryan Day, you're just so sick of people getting away. There's a lot of things you can let someone call your team. Soft is about the worst as a football coach.
I agree. And, I think he's a very good coach. They're a very good program, but they also recruit a ton of really good athletes. So it's inexcusable in some ways for them to get beat up at the line of scrimmage the way that they have against Michigan. And the tenor of the program has shifted
only by Michigan. And Michigan is the best offensive line in the nation. Like, I don't want to slight Michigan by hammering Ohio State. It's not that Ohio State's bad. Michigan is that good.
Yeah, but Michigan made them, play their style of football. Michigan posed their will on Ohio State. They have less talent. That's inarguable. Ohio State has the talent advantage. It does. The recruiting rankings show it. It's just the truth. Michigan beat them by sheer.
Okay, so is Mike Sainristil still not talented? He's 3 stars. Rod Moore, he's 3 stars. You know what I mean? Like, but yes, Ohio State has those high level guys, but Michigan is past that. Michigan is past, like, this is not the 2019 level of Michigan talent.
Well, no, I mean the 2019 team. I mean, it might have actually had more talent, across the board. Michigan,
with those stars, but I don't care about stars.
Michigan. Oh, I mean, but Michigan it does matter to some extent. I mean, that's why teams like Georgia end up winning the national championship. The stars do matter. Yes, they do. And so when you have, the players, and all coaches will admit this, the players make the program. And so, but the coach has an ability to impress his mindset onto his players. And Urban Meyer was able to do that well with being able to create some measure of balance between strength and finesse. Now, the balance shifted a little bit towards finesse with Ryan Day. And I think he, would probably admit to that to some extent.
But college football has shifted towards finesse.
Well, to some extent, but Michigan hasn't. I mean, Michigan was able to find the one thing that was really that they found a weakness in Ohio State through their ability to use strength.
But Michigan was flying in the face of the trajectory of college football. Sure. Michigan is going again. So Ohio State is trying to keep. I mean, X's and Joes and Jimmy's and X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joes, right? Ohio State still has yes, they got all the guys, and they're trying to keep up in the same schematic ways. Michigan.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's how you get all those talented players is because of the scheme. But the thing is that Michigan, doesn't necessarily appeal to those kind of players. They appeal to the more rugged, physical type players, and they use that toughness to beat up Ohio State in those two games, and that's how that narrative came to be, and that's why Lou Holtz has pointed it out. And again, Ohio State showed some toughness, but even leading up to that final play, I mean, they got stopped a couple of times in very short yardage situations. They ran the
Emeka Egbuka jet sweep.
Jet sweep. Yeah, exactly. Which looked like Michigan would not run a jet sweep on that kind of play.
Michigan ran a little pitch pass to Colston Loveland, thing on 4th and 2. They did. Michigan did on 4th and goal from the 2 against TCU.
But I think again that was an early situation. 4th and 1 late in the game, 4 minutes left. You think that Michigan's going to run that kind of play?
Jet sweep to Roman Wilson?
No, they're gonna probably pound it up the middle with Blake.
You're right.
And that's just the way that they are. And so there is some truth to
what did Ohio State do with the game on the line?
They ran the ball, but I mean they should have run the ball. They had 10 defenders, and again there was a misalignment with the Notre Dame. They saw a weakness on the left side. The defense shifted towards the right, and that's what a good coach does. And Ryan Day is a good coach, but there's a reason why that narrative existed.
There is, but what I want to make sure it's not lost that Ohio State is not just soft because Michigan manhandled them. Michigan manhandled everybody. It was concerning the way Ohio State quit in that fourth quarter at Columbus. If you're a Buckeye, right? Like a Buckeye supporter, for sure. That's about it for the last 55 games.
Yeah, true. But again, I never.
So how does a narrative? It feels lazy.
Well, it's not lazy because again, how many?
I'm not accusing you of this.
How many teams are comparable to Ohio State? I mean, Ohio State's going to blow out most teams, and they're going to win by sheer talent. Again, when the talent was at least similar with Michigan, the physicality won out, and Michigan's physicality and toughness ended up being the difference in those two games. And so, again, I think the narrative was true in a lot of ways, and I think this was a good chance for Ryan Day to kind of reset expectations for his program, and he took advantage of it in that moment. But even leading up to that moment, again, I mean, they kind of fed into the narrative with their inability to get some of those short yardage situations accomplished. So again, it's not something that needs to kind of totally define Ohio State going forward. But I mean, the seeds, there are definitely reasons to believe why
I'm not saying
that narrative existed.
Yeah, it didn't come out of thin air, but people leaned a lot into 4 quarters and not the rest. Of course, there are quarters and games and things that define careers and programs that matter the most. Michigan is that for Ohio State and vice versa. However, I mean, think about all the leeway and all the rope Jim Harbaugh got. He was 0-5. They didn't play the 6th year. I mean, he was 2,000 days into his Michigan tenure and hadn't won. And no one was calling him. I mean, there were questions, but it was not toughness or soft. There were a ton of questions around the program. But I'm not saying it wasn't the same thing. And Ohio State, that super soft Ohio State team that lost to God. I've never defended Ohio State like this in my life. I don't know what's happening. Ohio State drives me nuts, and I don't know how this has happened. But
I don't know.
That soft Ohio State team, hold on, in 2021 won the Rose Bowl. Like, their standard is insanely high.
It is insanely high. But again, they're defined as Michigan is defined by the Ohio State game. And yeah, there was a lot of talk about Jim Harbaugh and how he couldn't get it done, and that Urban Meyer owned him, and blah blah blah. And even in 2019 when they got blasted, I mean, there was a lot of talk about Jim Harbaugh, and whether he could get it done against Ohio State, and what that loss in 2019 against Ryan Day said about his program. And so, yeah, those things kind of form. It's the last game of the year, and so it kind of leaves a taste in your mouth. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, depending on which side you're on.
Yeah. So to put a bow on Ohio State and our thoughts on them, I was impressed. And if you just in terms of I guess when you think about it through the lens of Michigan, obviously, and the matchup in Ann Arbor that's upcoming, I don't know. I mean, before it felt like entering the season, Michigan felt like they were very, very well positioned to waltz through them again. I think I'd probably still pick Michigan. I'm not going to move off of that. However, Michigan and the run game took a step forward. But just in the trenches right now, Ohio State's not looking Charmin soft, and Michigan's not looking like it's going to a 3rd Joe Moore Award. Yet, it's still September.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say one way or the other, but I mean, I feel like Michigan still has the advantage in this game. I mean, again, Ohio State doesn't look like they had the firepower maybe they did even the last couple of years. So given the fact that Michigan has a really pretty strong defense, or they've shown that to be the case so far, I think, Michigan's well positioned going into that Ohio State game. And I think they have the players, and, again, the talent differential has also lessened. And Michigan, again, has the mental edge over Ohio State after these last 2 years.
Yeah, no, they do. That they do. There's no question. But I guess I'll wave my scarlet and gray pom-poms one last time to point out that Marvin Harrison Jr. did sprain his ankle in the game, right? So the attack was slightly limited. But moving on to Penn State, another equally performance from another really tough team in the Big Ten East. 31-0 over Iowa, and Michigan's former captain quarterback, Cade McNamara, who was 6 of 16 for 56 yards. Iowa fumbled 6 times, Reiner, and lost 4 of them. We know Iowa's offense is terrible. Brian Ferentz, start looking for a new job now. But Penn State continues to look as impressive as any team in the country through 4 weeks.
True. And well, going into the season, everybody was talking about their defense, and it's kind of lived up to expectations. Of course, going against Iowa, I mean, it's not the biggest challenge. It's not the biggest challenge in the world. They have a very limited scheme and limited firepower, even with, a couple of Michigan transfers, Cade McNamara and Eric All. But again, they couldn't do anything against Penn State. They kept getting stopped. They couldn't move the ball, turning the ball over. it was lights out for them pretty early in a whiteout situation. And so not terribly surprised by the final result. I mean, again, considering how good Penn State's defense and what Manny Diaz has done with them, and then you consider what Iowa's offense is, it seemed like this was kind of the result to be expected.
Yeah, I read it wrong. I thought, well, I didn't see them putting the ball on the ground almost 25% of the time they had it in their hand. But I digress. I just figured Iowa's defense might pose a little more resistance. But eventually, if your offense cannot keep the ball at all, there is only so long that you can hold and hold and hold and hold on the other side of the field. Yes, and so Penn State, Drew Aller can continue to keep it rolling. Now, one thing I was thinking about watching is, and I wonder if it's a product just because it was against Iowa, and the main thing is their offense will not beat you, so do not turn it over under any circumstance. He threw 37 passes for 166 yards, right? I mean, that is beyond check down Charlie. That's like 4.5 yards an attempt. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, no one, if your final line is 60-some% completions, 4 touchdowns, no picks, you will take that 6 days or 7 days a week and twice on Saturday in this case. But just a note, if Penn State may not have a downfield passing attack.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, I think, again, Penn State is pretty conservative for the most part offensively. They're like a typical Big Ten team. And why shouldn't they be? I mean, again, they have a really, really good defense. I mean, they don't need to go too crazy, from an offensive standpoint. In fact, they should try to maximize their defense as much as possible. I would stick to their really talented running game and keep that going. And again, use time of possession and limit the plays defensively and pick your battles offensively, knowing that your defense is probably going to hold up, especially if they're, facing a limited amount of plays and you're controlling the ball yourselves from an offensive standpoint.
They profile very similarly to a team that you and I watch and write and cover and talk a lot about. I don't know if it sounds familiar. Dominant defense, multiple capable running backs or a good running game, weapons on the outside, a quarterback who can move the ball with his legs. I mean, certainly JJ is more seasoned than Drew Aller, who waited years behind Sean Clifford. It felt like, but. Or maybe last year he was just a true freshman. I think now he might be a second year. Feels like he's been waiting forever. Either way, Penn State and Michigan feel like mirror images of one another, and that's a compliment to both.
Right. And again on Saturday, Penn State's time of possession 45 minutes and 27 seconds. Yeah, I mean, that's a.
How many first downs did Iowa get? Do you have that?
Let me see.
Okay. Well, as you look that up, we're gonna move on because we are wrapping this show up, but we felt we needed, because we are talking Big Ten East, and we've talked about every team other than just about Indiana, who survived Akron and like double, triple, quadruple overtime or something at home in Bloomington. The last team to mention is Michigan State. And Maryland. That game, Maryland goes into East Lansing, 31-9 winner. I think Michigan State's been outscored 72-16 the past 2 weeks since the Mel Tucker debacle. But it's not just that. It's since Michigan State has also started playing Power 5 competition. Now, we started this show just mentioning Washington very briefly and how dominant their offense was. But yesterday, it was not a dominant Washington offense that Michigan State was overmatched against. MSU is just real. I mean, they're trending in the wrong direction. A lot of self-inflicted wounds, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback play is shaky. The defense is suspect. Again, Michigan State's been in steady decline since that victory over Michigan in 2021. I mean, they're 6-11 against Power 5 teams since then, and it just looks like it's going to keep getting worse. Again, I think week 5 is a very critical period for MSU because that's when the redshirt rule really comes into effect. And you can see maybe some departures there. I mean, they already lost a commitment on Saturday evening. These are not good days in East Lansing right now.
Yeah, no, I read some good stories by our colleagues, Chris Laurie, Jeff Seidel, who were in East Lansing yesterday, and it sounds like acting head coach Harlan Barnett is doing all the right things, and the players, for what is being said and reported, are trying as well. Harlan knows everybody knows the situation you just laid out, and he said as much. He's like, look, if anybody wants to go and wants to jump ship, there are no hard feelings. But speak now. Now, nobody is going to raise their hand in front of an entire team. so it was sort of leading the witness a little bit. However, there is a sense of camaraderie. Michigan State is a proud program, a proud fan base. There are players who went there with expectation. There are players who are on that roster with an NFL expectation. And everybody is having tryouts, whether it's for their future in East Lansing or for their future somewhere else, whether that's coaches, whether that's players. Everybody is, as they say, putting the tape out there. And now the reason this is relevant for our discussion is it feels as if Michigan can write this game off as one of the potential tests of the season. It seemed like a long shot early on in the year, thinking that it was going to be a test, but Michigan State at 6-6 will push Michigan to the brink more often than not, right? Last year, and even last year, that was a bad Michigan State team that went 5-7, lost at home to Indiana, and they were in a one-possession game in the second half. I think in the fourth quarter, it was like a 10-point game, right? And so Michigan controlled it the whole way. However, MSU finds a way to hang around. They often do, even when they're not supposed to. In 2017, they were supposed to lose. They won 14-10. In 2015, trouble with the snap. That was a very good Michigan State team. But even in 2012, when Michigan won 12-10, MSU was 6-6 that year. They lost 5 Big Ten games by like 10 or 15 or 13 points combined. It was a game-winning field goal. However, this year, it doesn't feel like one of those Michigan State teams.
No, it doesn't. They seem so limited across the board. They didn't really do anything particularly well, and it's just remarkable considering again where they were only a couple of years ago. The 11-2 season, everything was just kind of humming, and there was a lot of momentum. And now it just seems like they won't even be able to compete on the same field as Michigan. And I don't even know.
I want to stop short of that because I know you're not saying that. We are speaking like just how it feels, but like Michigan State, like as soon as we do this, like Mark D'Antonio is now on that sideline. They're probably gonna find a way. There's gonna be some tricks to keep it interesting. But man, who could have seen that coming, Reiner, from that day? That Michigan State beat Michigan to go to either 8-0 or 9-0 or something, and Michigan fell. The direction Michigan has taken and the direction Michigan State has taken.
Michigan kind of bounced back right after that. Took care of business, beat Ohio State again, got that monkey off their back in 2021, and went to the college football.
They haven't lost in the regular season since.
Yeah, and it's been a steady rise for them and a steady continuation of their kind of rebuild and what they've tried to do with the offensive line. I mean, they have a real identity. That's the thing that Michigan State has lacked. Yep. They don't have that identity, and they've been searching for it pretty much the entire time that Mel Tucker has been there. I mean, the one time that they did have the identity was, again, when they had Kenneth Walker. They wanted to run the ball and, play off of that with the play action and flea flickers, and they haven't been able to recreate that. And again, the defense has remained a liability throughout the whole time that he's been there. And that's the thing. Like, I just don't see how MSU against Michigan can really come up with some kind of defensive game plan that's going to limit Michigan. And I also don't think, judging by the quarterback play, that they're going to have much success against Michigan's, defensive backs, and secondary once that settles in. I mean, again, once Rod Moore kind of gets back to full health, and Will Johnson has got more reps under his belt, and Mike Sainristil is obviously playing at a very high level. I mean, it's going to be very challenging for Michigan State to throw the ball against Michigan, I think.
Yeah, Michigan's defense is better this year. I think I'm this close to feeling very confident in that. And MSU's offense is certainly worse and has a less, no matter who it is, a less experienced quarterback than Peyton Thorne last year. And
there's no Keon Coleman.
And no one to just throw up 5 jump balls for 150 yards to. That was the entirety of the offense. And it's just to put a bow on it. It's remarkable, and it's easy to kick someone when they're down, which Mel Tucker certainly is. But the smoke and mirrors that Mel Tucker was at Michigan State might be second to none that I've ever seen. That identity you talk about in 2021, that is Kenneth Walker, was literally, yes, Mel Tucker gets credit for acquiring the best transfer portal player, maybe in the history of the portal thus far, in the recent portal era. Certainly the most impactful, as we've seen where Michigan State has gone since him. Michigan State's identity was Kenneth Walker here, please go save us. Or, as you said with the flea flickers, it's let's hand it to Kenneth Walker so everyone thinks he's going to get it, and then he throws it back to the quarterback so he can throw it to someone else. It was he ran for all 5 touchdowns in the win over Michigan in East Lansing that year. I mean, it was. Michigan fans were right. It was one man who did it, and boy, oh boy, how things have changed in East Lansing.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of sad to see in the sense that, again, they look like they had something going there, but again, it was a mirage, and it quickly faded away in 2022, and it just has gotten progressively worse since then.
And this rivalry is back now. Last year, the tunnel, I mean, with everything that happened, it got ugly, and the rivalry became unfun. For a while, and I'm sure once we get closer to the game, like some of the ugliness will come back. But in general, this rivalry is best when both teams are at their best. I know people in the Michigan State circles, yes, they enjoyed hammering Michigan in the Brady Hoke years in 2013 and 2014 when they just annihilated them in a couple games back to back in East Lansing. But certainly, I would imagine the 2015 win, I mean, not just because of how it happened, but beating a Michigan team that had everything to play for, that means way more on that end. And the same goes for Michigan. Beating an MSU team who's playing for something that matters, but that hasn't really happened in many years. All the times Michigan wins has been sort of these things. I mean, it's not Michigan's fault that Michigan State has had a number of down years lately, but that's just sort of the way it's been going. And it does not look like Michigan State is going to pose any real problems for Michigan again here. Wow. I did not see the Big Ten segment overtaking this show, but it's Big Ten season, and
it's interesting.
It is as interesting as it gets. And Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, 3 uber elite teams that are all going to get to meet, and we get to watch it unfold ahead of us. So Reiner, good work as always. Thanks for putting up with my rants. Andrew Burkle, behind the scenes, our sports editor and our show's producer. That's who we really could not make this all happen without. And then also we got to give our thanks to editor-in-chief Nicole Avery-Nichols, executive editor Anjanette Delgado, sports editor Kirkland Crawford, and audio engineer Robin Chan, who make everything else happen behind the scenes. So we have the platform to do this. All right, we are rocking and rolling, Reiner. Next time I see you, it will be our fine. Well, I'll see you in person at Schembechler Hall on Monday. But next time we talk, we will be previewing Michigan's first road trip of the year to Nebraska. We're going to be staying at some random courtyard somewhere between Omaha and Lincoln next weekend. I will rely on you to show me the ropes. It will be my first time in Nebraska. Have you been there?
I've not been to Nebraska, actually. So,
God, the blind leading the blind.
It will be the blind leading the blind, and no, I'm looking forward to it. I've heard it's a great environment, a cool place to watch a game, and certainly a tradition-rich stronghold is Nebraska. So it should be fun.
Mike Sainristil said it is still his favorite college football environment outside the big house. So we have that to look forward to. All right, we gave our thanks. Be sure to do your part and subscribe, like, review. We'll see you next time. This is Hey Oh Yes.